In this English lesson, you're going to listen to a short story called The Cafe Reunion. This is a great way to practice your English listening skills by listening to comprehensible input. Be sure to turn on subtitles, and at the end of the story, we're going to have 10 phrasal verbs from the story and also some idioms so that you can learn new words and phrases. Let's start with the story. The Cafe Reunion. Rachel pushed open the glass door of Oliver's cafe. The smell of coffee filled the air, mixed with the sound of milk frothing and quiet chatter. She closed her umbrella, shaking off the raindrops, and looked around. The cafe had a cosy feel. There were wooden tables, shelves lined with books, and a small chalkboard on the wall with today's specials written in chalk. She spotted an empty table near the back and headed straight for it. Rachel pulled out her notebook and phone, ready to start. Her editor had sent her here to write about hidden cafes in London. She didn't know much about the place, just that it had been getting a lot of attention lately for its charm and friendly atmosphere. She glanced toward the counter, trying to catch the owner's eye. That's when she froze. Behind the counter, wiping down a tray, was Oliver. Oliver looked up and saw her. For a moment, his face was blank, but then he smiled. "Rachel?" he said, walking around the counter. Rachel stood, unsure of what to say. "Oliver? What are you doing here?" He laughed. "I could ask you the same thing." "I'm here for work," she said, holding up her notepad. "I'm writing about cafes in London. I had no idea this was your place." "It's mine," Oliver said. "Welcome to Oliver's Cafe." Rachel laughed nervously. "Well, I guess I don't need to ask who the owner is." He pulled out a chair for her. "Sit down. Let's catch up." Rachel sat down, still feeling a bit shocked. She hadn't seen Oliver in almost a decade. They'd been close at university, best friends who did everything together. She'd always thought that they'd stay in touch. But one day, he disappeared. No explanation, no goodbye. "So," Rachel began, trying to sound casual, "how long have you been running this place?" "About 5 years, Oliver said. "It started as a small project, but it's grown." "What about you? Still writing?" "Always," Rachel said. "Though I didn't expect to find you as part of the story." Oliver chuckled. "Life's funny like that." The conversation turned to old times. They laughed about late-night study sessions and cheap takeaway dinners. For a moment, it felt like nothing had changed. But the unanswered question hung in the air, making Rachel's chest tighten. Finally, she spoke up. "Why did you disappear, Oliver? You just left." Oliver sighed and leaned back in his chair. "I wanted to explain, but it's hard to talk about." "I think I deserve to know," Rachel said, her voice softer now. Oliver nodded. "You're right. During our final year, my dad got really sick. I had to go home and help. It all happened so fast. I thought I'd come back, but I couldn't. Then time passed and I didn't know how to reach out again." Rachel felt a lump in her throat. "You could have told me. I would have understood." "I know," Oliver said, "but back then, I was just trying to keep it together." For a moment, neither of them spoke. The sound of cups clinking and soft music filled the space between them. Finally, Oliver smiled. "Enough about the past. Let me get you something." He went behind the counter and came back with 2 steaming cups of tea and a small plate of cookies. "For old time's sake," he said, settling them down. Rachel smiled. "You always knew how to make things better." They sat together, drinking tea and sharing stories about their lives since university. Oliver told her about his dad's recovery, the ups and downs of running a cafe, and how much he loved creating a space where people felt welcome. Rachel shared her adventures as a journalist, from covering big events to chasing leads in small towns. "It feels like no time has passed," Oliver said, leaning back in his chair. "Except we're not living on instant noodles anymore," Rachel joked, making them both laugh. When it was time to leave, Rachel stood up and reached for a bag. Oliver handed her a receipt, but instead of a total, there was a handwritten note at the bottom. "Let's catch up properly. Dinner soon?" Rachel looked at him and smiled. "I'd like that." Walking out into the cool evening air, Rachel felt lighter, as if she'd left something heavy behind. The rain had stopped and the city lights reflected on the wet pavement. As she walked home, she thought about how strange life could be, how one assignment had brought her back to someone she thought she'd lost forever. In this story, we use 10 commonly used phrasal verbs and 3 natural idioms. What we're going to do now, and stay until the end, is to go through these phrasal verbs, understand their meanings and how to use them in everyday conversations. And then, once you've done this, go back and listen to the story again. The first phrasal verb is push open. To push open means to open something like a door by pushing it. And in the story, Rachel pushed open the cafe door to step inside. Other examples are, he pushed open the door to the classroom and walked in quietly. And I pushed open the window to let some fresh air in. Number 2 is shake off, which is close to a very popular Taylor Swift song. And to shake off means to remove something by shaking or moving. And it can also mean to get rid of something like feelings or problems. In the story, when she entered a cafe, she shook off the rain from her umbrella. Other examples are, she shook off the sand from her shoes after the beach trip, which sounds like a tongue twister. She shook off the sand from her shoes. And it took him a while to shake off his nervousness before the speech. The next one is look around. To look around means to observe your surroundings or explore a place. In the story, she looked around the cafe to take it all in. Other examples are, we looked around the park to find a good spot for a picnic, and she looked around the shop but didn't find anything she liked. The next one is pull out. To pull out means to take something out of a bag, pocket, or container. In the story, Rachel pulled out her notebook and phone to prepare for the interview. Other examples are, he pulled out his wallet to pay for the meal, which is very nice of him. And she pulled out her phone to check the time. The next one is catch up. To catch up means to reconnect with someone and talk about what's happened in their lives. It can also mean to reach the same level as someone, which we'll see soon. In the story, Oliver invited her to catch up on their lives. Another example is, let's catch up over coffee this weekend. And I need to catch up on the work I missed while I was sick. The next one is bring back. To bring back means to make someone remember something or feel a certain way again. And in the story, the conversation brought back memories of university. Other examples are, that song always brings back memories of my childhood. And seeing her old house brought back a lot of emotions. The next one is speak up. To speak up means to say something, especially when it's important or difficult to say. In the story, Rachel finally spoke up to ask why Oliver had disappeared. Other examples are, if you don't agree, you should speak up during the meeting. And she was too shy to speak up about her concerns. The next one is keep it together. To keep it together means to stay calm and composed during a stressful situation. In the story, Oliver explained he was trying to keep it together during a tough time. Other examples are, she kept it together during the presentation, even though she was nervous. And it's hard to keep it together when everything feels overwhelming. The next one is come back. To come back means to return to a place or situation. In the story, he thought he'd come back to university, but things didn't work out. Other examples are, I can't wait to come back to this restaurant, it's amazing. And after taking a break, she decided to come back to her art classes. The last phrasal verb before we talk about idioms is leave behind. To leave behind means to move on from something or let go of it. It can also mean to forget or not take something with you. In the story, Rachel felt like she'd left behind years of unanswered questions. Other examples are, when he moved to the city, he left behind his old life. And don't leave behind your phone, it's still on the table. Now, the first idiom is life's funny like that. This idiom is used to describe unexpected or surprising events in life. In the story, life's funny like that, Oliver said, referring to their unexpected reunion. Another example is, I bumped into my old teacher today. Life's funny like that. The second idiom is for old time's sake. This idiom means doing something to remember or celebrate the past. In the story, Oliver brought the tea and cookies for old time's sake. Another example is, let's watch that movie again for old time's sake. And the last idiom is a lump in her throat. And this idiom describes feeling emotional or close to tears. In the story, it said, Rachel felt a lump in her throat as Oliver explained why he disappeared. Another example is, the speech was so moving that everyone had a lump in their throat. So, those are the phrasal verbs and idioms. Like I mentioned before, what to do now is go back to the story and listen to this again so that you can get more practice and more repetition. And then in the description, be sure to click the link so you can listen to more short stories in English on this channel. One last thing, if you enjoyed this lesson, then please share it with a friend. Thank you for listening and speak to you soon. Bye for now.